For more on this important issue, we're joined from Beijing by current affairs commentator Einar Tangen. Good to see you, sir. Look, this hukou system, I'm sure you know a lot about it, but I'm sure a lot of viewers around the world have not much idea of how this really works. We talked about how it got enacted. We talked about some of the reforms. What's next for this system?
Well, Phil, I mean, in terms of the history, I mean, it's deeply rooted. You can go back to the imperial registration system that governed China for thousands of years. But the issue here really is very much cultural. In the U.S., we would not even think that there would be any kind of check on your ability to go anywhere you want and set up a life. But in China, when you're talking about 1.4 billion people and an economic transformation over the last 30 years, the government is very sensitive because they don't want cities that cannot provide for the people in them. If you've ever been in, I'm sure you have, Phil, in terms of a Beijing traffic jam, which seems to last most of the day, you understand that there's a limit to what can happen. And, you know, schools, hospitals, roads, all of these things don't appear magically because you wanted to go there. Beijing is a particular magnet. If they were to drop the hukou tomorrow, you probably have about 15 million people coming to this city. There's economic opportunities here, but it's not all just upper middle income, well-educated people. There are a lot of people who are just looking for an opportunity. You look at Mumbai, you look at Delhi, places like this in India, you have huge areas where people are trying desperately to find a new life. Unfortunately, it doesn't materialize in the way that they want. So going forward, these are incremental steps.
Einar, it sounds like to me that if the government took more steps to build out more opportunities in places outside of Beijing, that would reduce some of the demand, perhaps, that people would all run towards that one area, basically giving great services, great hospitals, great schools, great job opportunities. Wouldn't that essentially outdate the hukou system?
Well, they're already doing that, Phil. They've set up a kind of a master plan which puts Beijing at the center of a spoke, at the center, the hub of a center of spokes of cities that surround it. And this is part of the way that they're dealing with moving congestion. In fact, they're moving all the city services out of the central city, and this is for Beijing. So they're doing what they can, but you're talking about basically this idea: how much does an individual have to sacrifice for the common good, and what is necessary to keep that common good going? So within China, it's perhaps culturally a little bit different. People are used to the idea that the collective does have a very important part, and it's not just simply the individual's rights. It's a balancing act between them. You cannot just have economic development with a kind of haphazard, go-forward, laissez-faire. When you're dealing with this larger group of people, if people just started migrating, it would be a complete disaster.
The hukou system also has this points system as well. In 30 seconds, explain to us how that works and how that might ultimately help perhaps people who want to do startups in different cities.
Well, as you covered earlier, it covers a number of areas, whether you've maintained your tax status, whether you no criminal record, your education, all of these things. The important thing there is it's going to give a leg up to those who have the ability to create jobs and value in cities. And that's really what the government is looking for, is to balance their cities. They have an age problem. They want to move forward and make sure that the cities continue to be viable.
The issue of unregistered citizens, my understanding from what I've read, it's fairly significant. I think we talked about 13 million. Some estimates put that even higher, perhaps. How do we understand that as foreigners or outside of China, and ultimately what's going to happen to these people?
Well, there's a great period of self-sacrifice in China where they said, they had to control the population. If they hadn't, China would not have been in the position that it is today. During that time, however, there were people who had children illegally, second children, they hid them or whatever. And those people are now being formally recognized. You think of it as an amnesty that goes forward. Now, you have to remember that that's 13 million out of a population of 1.4 billion people, which tells you that the vast majority of people did, in fact, comply with the state policy on one child in order to promote development.
Last question. In 2016, because you're an expert at this, give us a little surprise. What do you think might surprise you in terms of reforms in China?
Well, actually, things aren't never that much of a surprise. If you read the 5-year plans, if you read the government speeches, it's very, very much incremental. I think the biggest surprise and what people should be looking at is the Belt and Road Initiative and how that starts to get rolled out and implemented. This is key to China's future. They need to regionalize, they need to create markets which can buy their goods, as well as markets that can supply raw materials. And I think this is what people should be looking at, both economically, politically, and socially.